This podcast is sponsored by Aleppo Restaurant on Wonderland Road North and A. Miller George Funeral Home, where every life is celebrated, and their sister company Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you may be listening. We welcome you to another edition of the Vickers Crossing podcast. The Vickers Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And my name is Rob Henderson, and I'm the priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Anglican Church in London. I'm here with Kevy once again.
Rabbi Kevin George from St. Aidan's Anglican Church, from whence we podcast today.
That's right, in a nice warm office.
Yep.
All right, and producer Ian's here.
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
How we doing?
Good. A little, just calming down. Once we get started, everything will be like,
He was a little rushed.
We flustered him.
Yeah, that's the word.
We flustered Ian today. Very
Yeah.
good. All right, well, it's good to have everybody back. And hello to all our Facebook listeners, Facebook Live.
Hello,
checking in.
Facebook Livers.
Glad to have you guys along with us, and want to say hi to our sponsors, as always, the wonderful folks in our community that really help us along to get this podcast up and going. Aleppo Restaurant at 666 Wonderland Road North in London, and our good friends at A. Miller George Funeral Home, where every life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated, and you'll find those good folks on Rideout Street South here in London.
Dave Mullen. If you're into the funeral home and you see Dave Mullen, tell him you listen to the podcast and you're thankful for his contribution to make it happen.
We appreciate it. Or just honk when you drive by.
Or honk, yeah. Hopefully there's not a service going on.
The neighborhood will love that. Yeah. That's right. And today we welcome Michelle and Chris, the Crow family, are here. Hey guys, how are you?
Welcome.
Well, thanks.
Good.
Yeah,
Hi,
thank
thanks
you.
for having us.
When I got the email that the Crow family is coming in, I was like, that's a really cool last name.
Yeah.
That's a really cool last name.
We have the pigeons coming next week. No joke. I had parishioners down in Tecumseh. Their last name were Pigeons.
The pigeons? Yeah.
We got the crows and the pigeons.
Well, we're going to cover
Well,
all
there's only
the...
two of
all
us,
the
so we're
birds.
attempted murder, right?
Attempted murder. There you go.
Well,
Perfect.
it's nice to go to a podcast where people make fun of your name.
Yeah,
That's right.
why not?
So we
Could be
welcome
worse,
all our
right?
guests. Yeah.
Could be way worse. Yeah.
Well, Michelle and Chris are here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about themselves and their journey, and more about their daughter, Molly Rose, who's not here with us today.
Yeah.
But they got a great story and a fascinating story, and I've got to know them a little bit through time at the parish, and just had a wonderful baptismal celebration with Molly a little while ago, which was wonderful for the community, I know, and for you guys as well. So welcome, and we're going to share some of your story with our listeners coming up in just a little bit, okay?
Great.
Right now, though, we want to check in with each other. Now, we're about less than 24 hours removed from our federal election as we record our podcast here today. So we thought we'd just start briefly, a few minutes, maybe just checking in, and any surprises, anything not surprising, and your thoughts about last night, Kevin?
Well, I wasn't too surprised by the outcome. I sort of predicted, but the last couple of days, because, I think that in the end, Scheer just started to look I felt like the more people got to know Scheer, the less interested they were in him. And so it seemed to me that what seemed like it was going to be a very close tie earlier in the campaign, it was obvious to me that the Liberals weren't going to achieve a majority. But that I predicted about 150 seats. Well, they did a little better than that, but
Just by a little bit, though.
just by a little bit. But that was sort of my guess, was between 145 and 150. What's not surprising in a way, and what concerns me, is just the regionalization of our politics. That there seems to be such a, and if you're a social media fan, you read what's coming out of Alberta and Saskatchewan today, it's absolutely mind-boggling and disappointing. A lot of vitriol about Newfoundland being stupid and all this stuff because they voted, all progressive.
Yeah, it was all red pretty much.
Red with one seat, and but I like the 7 seats in Newfoundland. We're going to tip the balance. I mean, come on. But it's just another sign, though, of how polarized politics has become. So it concerns me that the country is so regionally divided.
Yeah. Ian, any thoughts about yesterday? Were you watching things last night?
You voted for the first time, yeah?
Yeah, I did vote for the first time.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
First time voting, yeah.
Good for
Which
you.
is great. As soon as I got home, we turned on the TV to watch the CTV coverage of the thing. Yeah, it was really interesting to be like, oh, yeah, my vote is in there somewhere.
It is,
Which is fun. yeah, it was an interesting sort of new look at the election, because like I watched the election last time there was an election. I was gonna say last year, but that was wrong. And I didn't really like care as much because it didn't really like affect me because I wasn't directly
part in it.
Yeah, I wasn't voting and I wasn't like hurrah. But this time it was interesting to just sort of see that I was a part of whatever was going on. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
My son voted for the first time federally last night. He had voted in the provincial election 2 years ago now, almost.
Probably
Year and a
still
half,
dealing
yeah.
with the post-traumatic stress from that.
That's right, getting over that.
Kidding.
But, so no, that's good. It's good to see you guys that you went out and did that and represented. And I didn't really have any big surprises either. I don't think anybody was really
No.
shocked by anything because the polls were saying all along that it wasn't as close as obviously it was going to be. But I was always kind of interested in watching some of the big names lose their seats. That's always kind of
Yeah.
fascinating.
George Canyon.
Yeah.
George Canyon, the Canadian musician, was a
was a
conservative
candidate.
which was I was shocked.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
have
Didn't
no
know
idea
about that. Yeah,
no
yeah.
idea. It was
Out
hilarious.
in Nova Scotia. But yeah, to see
Like-
Ralph Goodell go out.
Ralph Goodale and Lisa Ray.
Lisa Ray,
was
yeah.
a bit of a surprise, I thought, and
And if I can say, I mean, not a shock to anyone who listens to this podcast, not a conservative here. But Lisa Ray represents what used to be a progressive part of that party. She's what we would have called a red Tory years ago. She has a very strong social conscience, goes to pride parades, shows up at all that stuff. And I think that's a big loss for the Conservative Party because I think that, it's another step towards polarization. But
yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see. A lot of predictors this morning saying we'll be back at it in a couple of years because it's going to be how's Trudeau going to manage this minority and so on. So we'll watch and we'll take part as best we can and continue to have our voices heard in the different ways we can do that. So great. So how are things with you guys? You doing okay?
Yeah, doing great.
Yeah, doing great. School's good.
Yeah, school's going great. It's like I was walking to school and I was like, I can't believe I'm still here. Like I can't believe I'm actually in the program that I want to be doing and doing things that I want to be doing, and it's great.
Happy guy.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
oh yeah, I feel the same way today.
I'm not buying.
It's a bit of sarcasm, but some days you're the fire hydrant, sometimes you're the dog. Today I happen to be the fire hydrant. So
Well, Ian's feeling good, so
I'm feeling great.
Let's keep the momentum going. We got a special segment we do here, Chris and Michelle, on the podcast.
This is a big one.
Boy, I'll tell you, when we get feedback, it all comes from this segment.
That's right.
Because this segment is called Ask Ian Anything.
Oh.
and we have a very interesting question today.
Brilliant.
Go ahead.
Bring it on.
This question comes from the hills of Tibet.
Oh,
And one of our listeners up there
so one listener up there.
Fancy.
has sent along a question to
Good
Ian.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well, I think they're bringing it in via homing pigeon. The pigeons delivered it. The crows weren't available.
No, we don't fly that far.
So the question today for Ian is, should you be able to have your dream guest on the Vickers Crossing, any celebrity person you can imagine, who would you like to have as a guest on the Vickers Crossing as your dream guest?
That's a good question.
Huh. Wow, that is a great question.
Isn't it? They listen well in Tibet.
Yeah, they do.
They do. Oh man.
Very, very wise.
Yeah. This is from the Dalai Lama, in fact.
Oh,
Of course, yeah.
No, he's in exile. He's
We're
not
close.
in Tibet.
That's a great question. I think it would have to be someone that would be man, I don't even know.
No?
There's so many
living or
options.
dead?
Why not
be
make it
anybody.
matters?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I wish I had a quick answer to be like, oh,
All right,
this
well.
person.
To give us your top three.
There'd be a couple. There'd be like someone who would like. I think interviewing topical, but interviewing a Justin Trudeau would be really interesting.
That would be interesting,
Because
yeah.
But that's
I'd
kind of
love
obvious.
to ask him why he thought it was okay to paint his face brown.
That'd be a good starting question. Yeah.
Really good question.
Topical. Another one would be, I'm a huge fan of the musical Hamilton.
Okay.
Listen to it, watch it. It's great.
Yeah.
Very expensive ticket. So like,
Yeah.
Anyway, having Lin-Manuel Miranda on would
Oh,
be
yeah.
really cool
That would be
because
pretty good.
he would I think he'd be a lot of fun because he's a really cool guy.
He's a cool guy.
And then another world, probably. Gotta go with like Ed Sheeran because I play a lot of his music and having him on would also be very cool. So, in an ideal world, any of those would be fun, and then just anyone at all would be cool.
Right.
So I'm
pretty good.
I'm
He's
just
given us
excited,
three.
That's three.
I think that's three very good and
pretty
interesting, diverse guests. So thank you, Ian.
Yeah, I'm just excited to like anyone's in the room. I'm like, cool, this is great. Like, let's go. Yeah. So.
Ian's a happy guy.
Yeah.
Happy guy.
Couple of crows sitting on a stool gets him excited.
Easy to please.
Yeah.
All right. Time now for our other segment that we like to call the music morsel.
Yep.
Speaking of music and Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
We're not going to do another Ed Sheeran song.
I promise
this
it's.
week.
I
Okay,
promise it's
good.
not another Ed
No
Sheeran.
more
song.
Ed Sheeran.
No more of the Ed Sheeran. I mean, I love Ed too.
Bless his Irish
Getting a
soul.
little old. Yeah.
He's
yeah.
Irish, isn't he? No, he's
No.
English.
No, he's
English.
English. Yeah,
Sorry.
he's English.
My apologies to all the English listeners out there, and
the
to Ed
Irish.
Sheeran, and to the Irish, and whomever else is offended. Send your email to Rev Rob Henderson.
Forward that email.
Okay.
So, all right,
you
the
ready?
music morsel is a chance for Revy, Kevy, and I to play a little bit of music from our era and try to stump Ian, and then he'll come back at us. So,
Oh, yeah.
you ready?
We're ready. I'm going to give you
Okay,
12
let it rip.
seconds, okay?
I'm ready.
You ready for this?
Always.
Always? Okay, let me give you some volume.
Play along at home, Facebook.
Play along at home. If you think you can guess, guess.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you
Gotcha.
gave him that
Oh,
extra
gotcha.
chord.
Gotcha.
Okay.
It's that. It's. What is it? I don't know who it's by. I can't remember how to pronounce it. It's like I Sharona or something like that.
Close. I think we'll give
darn
it to
close,
you.
yeah.
I think we'll give it to
Really
you.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's.
My Sharona.
That's
My
what it is.
Sharona.
That's what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, bonus points at Full House.
Okay, there you go.
Extra
That'll
points
show
for
my
that.
age.
Michelle. We're gonna give you 5 points for that.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. Take it.
It's by the Knack.
The knack. Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten that.
Yeah.
That was a good music morsel.
That was a
That
good
was a
music
good one.
morsel.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That last chord gave it away.
That
You
last
were
chord gave
stumped
it away.
until you gave me the
I
last
thought it
chord.
was another song. Now I can't remember what it was
Like
because as soon as those chords came, as soon as those chords came, I was like,
Jenny.
right, that
Yeah.
song.
Clearly.
All right, here we go.
Babe, don't make a sound. 2 a.m. low, gotta keep it down.
Oh, come on. Give me a break.
Let me ask Chris and Michelle because I'm at a loss here.
Yeah,
I'll let you
could
take
keep
my
going,
turn.
I wouldn't know. I don't know.
No?
I don't know what it's called, but I know it from the radio. Like,
Oh,
I
do you?
know
Yeah,
it.
yeah, you
It's a
probably
song on the radio.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
really?
say
I'm
I'm
not
gonna say
singing
it's
it.
by Pitbull.
No way.
No.
Okay.
So the song is called Body.
guess.
It is
Body.
by Loud Luxury, who are also Canadian.
Well, yes,
Okay.
of course.
Loud Luxury.
Loud
Yeah, they
Luxury.
played it at the Junos. So if you were watching the Junos, they were there.
Was it after 9 p.m.? Because I was in bed.
No, it was like one of the first people to
Oh,
play.
was it? Okay,
Yeah.
I should have remembered.
They played with the Western marching band.
Oh, wow.
So that's
just-
yeah.
I
Fun
do remember
fact.
that.
Just so
Yeah.
you know, Ian, in the preaching world, they call me Loud Luxury.
Well, the first part.
Yeah, I'm known as Quiet Poverty.
Wow.
Poverty, yeah.
Wow.
All right, enough of this madness. Enough of this madness. Let's get down to business. So once again, welcome to Chris and Michelle Crow from London here. And I first met Chris and Michelle through my ministry over at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's and their daughter Molly Rose. And got talking to them a little bit and learning more about their story, and really wanted to have them here in the podcast to share a little bit about their journey and Molly Rose. So their daughter Molly was born with a very rare genetic condition, and it's called You Hoover Fong Syndrome.
It's a fun one, isn't it?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good one. You Hoover Fong Syndrome. And if you're hearing that for the first time and scratching your head, it would not be surprising because not a lot of people,
Nobody
Not
has
alone.
heard of it.
Nobody's-
Even the
Anybody out there in the
geneticist hadn't heard
Facebook
of
world?
it,
even the
so-
geneticist, yeah.
Oh,
it was
really?
new to the
Yeah.
geneticist, so
Yeah.
rare. So maybe guys, just share with our listeners a little bit about Molly, You Hoover Fong Syndrome, a little bit about what that all is, because people are starting at ground zero with nothing. So
Yeah.
get us up to date.
Right where we were.
Yeah.
So I mean, right off the get go, it's named after two geneticists, I guess we'll call them. So You is one, and then Hoover Fong is another one. Julie Hoover Fong is actually a doctor from Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and so she took sort of the lead on this one, is my understanding of it. From our geneticist, Dr. Prasad, shout out. She's lovely at LHSC. Basically, Molly, they believe, is about the 20th person in the world to be diagnosed with this, and we have not found another one in Canada. So
20th?
20th
In the
yeah.
world.
In the world.
Wow.
Now I believe we're up to about 22, 23-ish worldwide. We do have a Facebook group, and it's very exciting, and they've become sort of a family in a way, like never met them sort of thing, but everybody is so supportive and wonderful, and it's a very unique syndrome that she has in that no two kids are alike. There seems to be like, the checklist sort of thing that's very long, and Molly has a lot of them. So basically the main one is it has to do with developmental delay and growth delay. So Molly is 3.5 years old. She's 15 pounds, 80 centimeters tall. Like, she's very tiny, and then globally delayed as well, being that she everything takes her a little bit longer to figure out. She's a little bit behind her milestones, but eventually, so we hope, is going to meet them. So far, she's been doing pretty well.
Coming along.
Yeah,
she's
exactly.
Making little
Headway.
strides, a little
Yeah.
headway here and there. So
We get these little like bursts of, in our world, something huge, and it's very, very exciting.
What would an
But,
example of that be? Like what's maybe
like
happened
yesterday,
in the last,
Yesterday,
even
yeah.
yesterday, she pulled herself on her knees in her crib. This is unbelievable.
huge.
This is
This is-
huge.
this is
Molly
huge
has
for
very
a-
little mobility. She's a very good sitter. It took her a year
Quite a
to
while,
learn how to
yeah.
sit. So she pivots and she kind of buffs our floor. That's sort of how she moves right now. So the fact that she actually had an interest in pulling herself forward in an upward position is mind-boggling, amazing. A lot of kids with this syndrome don't walk or stand or any of that, and they have supportive services for that. Some do, some don't. So it's a big, huge range. Same with verbal ability. Some speak, some don't. Right now, Molly is limited to 1 word, 2 words. She says no a lot. Mama or mom. And yeah, that would be her extent of conversation.
So at what point was it after she was born, or did you find out before the tests and things that
No.
this was?
We had no idea
Okay.
at all what we were walking into. Like Molly was born early because she wasn't growing. And that was the first time at 32 weeks that we'd heard of that.
Right.
So, and then we assumed she was what the NICU calls an feed and grow
Feed
case,
and grow case,
is what
yeah.
they called her in the hospital, and she was there for 2 months. And so once you had to reach a benchmark, I think 4 or 5 pounds, 5 pounds, 4, something like that.
I think it was 4.
4 for
Yeah.
a car seat law. So, and then they have to be able to eat without being fed via tubes or whatever at the hospital. So Molly ended up being 5 pounds when we left. She was born at 2.5. And then she was fed by bottle or breastfed, and we did kind of a combination of standing on our head to get this girl to eat, but we did it. And then we were sort of thinking we had a premature baby, that was our life, that we had a premature baby, and she will quote unquote catch up, because that's what they say. And then you're kind of strolling along 6 months in, you're like, things aren't changing.
Where's
Like,
this
we're
catch
still
up?
doing the
Yeah.
same thing that we were doing before. And then I think we were approaching a little bit more, like 8 months, 9 months. And it was kind of, I said to the developmental team at the hospital, I'm like, I don't know what to do with her anymore, because we should have been done this stage long ago. And I'm not sure how to play with her, like when I was off on leave with her. Then they referred us to this amazing program at CPRI called the Home Visiting Program for Infants. And then they taught us like all these therapy games that we could play with her, which helped immensely.
Really changed our life and hers too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, just we could actually interact with her,
Yeah.
and where before we didn't know
Yeah.
what to
Right.
do with her or how to play with her, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not typical,
Yeah.
and yeah.
So at that point, we assumed she was still a premature baby with some delay. The term global delay came in there, like global developmental delay was tossed around there, like an informal diagnosis of she's just going to take longer to get there. They like to use that analogy of the scenic route rather than the direct highway to get somewhere. Like she's just going to take her sweet time and like, visit and tour everybody else first and she'll make it there eventually sort of thing. So now though, the reality of that is very wishy-washy sort of thing. And we don't know really what to expect from her based on the diversity of the other children who have this.
Molly is not your first child?
She is.
She is your first
and
child.
only, yeah.
Okay. So that was going to be my next question, is if you had another child and you might have seen something different. I mean, this must have been, given how very rare, I mean, I can't get my head wrapped around 20 people. Trying to find support for something like that is very difficult.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if you can share a bit about the supports that are in place or were in place when she was born, and as you move forward as a family, are there supports available to you in terms of education, health needs, community support?
Right.
What does that look like for you right now?
There are programs out there, but they're very hard to find. They're not just, at least that's what we're
you can't
finding.
Google it.
You can't just Google it and be, that's ours. We find out a lot through talking to all of our physicians, like people in our circle. We even know some people that have been through not what we're going through, but similar things.
Yeah.
That have gone through other programs as well. It's really just kind of talking to people and finding out what it is, because Googling things doesn't always.
Yeah.
First of all, you don't know what you're Googling,
Right? Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and two, it just doesn't always. It's not always as put out there, and the government doesn't do a great job at advertising these programs. But
Sure.
there are funding. There is funding, and there are programs. It's just a matter of obtaining it and how you get your hands on it.
Yeah.
And,
In a lot of cases with developmental disabilities and that sort of thing, when a child is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never been through this myself personally, but when a child is diagnosed with something, then from the medical community, right from that, they can start to point you towards where
Yeah.
those supports are. But
See,
I would
we did it
imagine, because
backwards.
this was something
Yeah.
that they couldn't even name.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like what are
Yeah.
they saying to you at the beginning? And
Yeah, we because it totally was backwards. So like we
Yeah.
got the diagnosis at the end of all the medical fun times. So basically they assumed it was her growth hormone, like in her pituitary gland in her brain. So we had a lot of work with the endocrinologist, and she had a lot of MRIs and scans and all these tests that go along with that are partially horrific at times, and then it ended up being no, her pituitary gland is fine, it's working just fine, it's actually functioning above normal. So then you're like, okay, well that doesn't add up, like she should be a giant if it's above normal.
Yeah.
Why is she not growing, sort of thing. And then you go through, like we had our baseball card array of doctors and specialists, and everybody was checking the boxes, and it was like, no, it's not this, no, it's not this, no, it's not this, but we'll keep you on the roster just in case somebody finds something else that plunks into this one. And really at the end of the day, it's genetic testing that saved the day on this one, because she has no other significant medical need.
And it was the last Hail Mary test.
It was
too.
exactly
We'd
like we
been
had
through
done a few
tests.
rounds already
Yeah.
where they test, they do blood testing and stuff like that, and through us and then through Molly as well, and they send it off to the States, lovely California and Chicago, thank you. And then this was like a last, let's drop in the bucket, let's just try, otherwise we'll try again in a few years, hopefully more research has been done. And then they came back with this one and we were flabbergasted.
Yeah.
And then the fact that we found out that the two of us together had a 25% chance of producing a child with this syndrome is mind-boggling. Seeing as it's not in our family, it's just luck of the draw. And so that would be the same for any other kid.
That's sort of easily traced back, like in terms
No,
of...
it's not one of those we did all the pre-tests while I was
Right.
pregnant, right? Like
Yeah.
like for
So
Down
it's-
syndrome and
Yeah.
every autism and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
nothing.
So I know, like in our family, we lost a couple of my great nieces to a condition called Bagans Disease, and they were twin girls, and so because they were identical, they both had it. But in their case, when they were first diagnosed, immediately the parents were tested, because each parent had to carry the same gene,
Absolutely.
and 1 in 100,000 people carried a gene, and that means I believe, if I'm remembering it correctly, it was a 50-50 chance
Wow.
than that you would, because they have an older daughter who didn't get Bagans
Amazing.
disease, but the younger girls did.
Yeah.
And so, it's just, and I mean, I know from living through that experience, and they lived to be 7, and it was a lot of hard work and
Oh,
a lot
boy.
of love and a lot of care
believe
piled
it.
into those girls. My heart just goes out to you, because I know that there's so many things that lack answers when you're in the middle of that. And I guess that's sort of the thing that comes to mind around these supports. I know watching my nephew Gary and his niece, his wife Annette, this young couple at the time in their 20s, I think it was family that really got them through it, and
sure.
a lot of support in their family and friend circle.
Yeah.
And I just wonder
Yeah,
what that's like for you
absolutely.
guys.
On at least my side, I'm as a teacher. I have a few friends who work more in special needs classrooms and developmental children and with learning disabilities or a vast array of different disabilities, and they've been a huge support. And then I work with one lovely lady whose daughter is on the other end, like she's a little bit older, with special needs, and that's been a godsend. Honestly, she's been amazing. Just for like little tidbits, like, have you looked at this program, or have you applied to this funding, or do you have this doctor? We have this doctor, and oh my gosh, we have the same doctor, and just sort of, you're not alone, and it's that
Right.
that understanding of you're not alone. And then
'Cause you feel
within our
alone.
like families,
It must be.
everybody, they always, it's funny to say, but Molly's become a little bit of a miracle child to everybody. Like the fact that she's so feisty and
Yeah.
fought through so much already. She's just, everybody just loves her, and there's just something about her, like she's just, there's something about her as a person that everybody's drawn to her, and she's just, everybody wants to help and be,
Right.
everyone's so supportive, and we don't ever feel alone, I
Right.
guess, in that sense. But when you're tackling it day after day, it's
Right.
very isolating,
never ends, right?
and it's very exhausting, and it's terrifying. And I found, I know you said it too, Chris, that when we found the diagnosis, it felt like the weight came off your shoulders a little bit, because we found out that it's not a syndrome that's going to end her. Like, and that
Right.
was like the biggest,
was the biggest
fear,
fear.
where
I
she's
bet.
not
Yeah.
growing and she's not developing as she should. And it was to the point of almost regressing, that
Yeah.
you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose her.
Yeah.
And then that's just a whole other fear that you're carrying forever.
Right.
And then when they said this is not a syndrome that will
it's not
end her,
terminal.
it's not
Yeah.
terminal.
No.
Like, she will thrive on this, and it's okay. It was like, oh my gosh, she has a life. Here we go.
Yeah.
And then it's been so much
We
better.
don't know what it's gonna look
I know,
like.
exactly. We don't know
But-
exactly
but
day in,
she's
day
gonna have
out,
one.
or
Who
what's down
among
the
us
road.
does know what our life is
Exactly,
gonna
That's
right?
right. Yeah, exactly.
But
So-
the fact she's going to be with us, so we
Yeah,
can think
that
ahead
has to
without
be a big
being
relief,
terrified. Yeah.
Interesting you say you're a teacher. I just on Facebook Live just showed my son this podcast. My son Omar.
Oh!
May Crow was his lovely teacher.
Bonjour,
last year.
mon ami. Oh, bonjour.
Ça va?
He gave me the biggest hug today.
Did he?
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah, so I'm just watching the things pop up. It said, just showed my son Omar. Mimi Crow was his.
Oh, thanks.
You
sweet.
just never know who's
I
peeking
know.
in.
Never
Oh my
know.
gosh, Mesa, thanks. Hi.
You were mentioning the support group that has 20 people worldwide.
20 people.
Yeah, that just blew my mind when you first told me that.
Yeah.
Because Chris said earlier, I was asking him about it before we started. He said, we get about 20. And I thought, well, London,
Maybe
Ontario,
Canada, yeah.
maybe Canada, but
It's
worldwide.
up to 28 now, though.
28.
So
yeah.
not all diagnoses, but family members, right?
Right.
So
Right. What kind of interaction do you have with them? What kind of feedback do you share with them that support you and
he's
and
looking
that you
at
can
you on
support
this
them?
one.
Yeah,
I'm like, because he's on it,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
No, I'm on it. So it's been fantastic. So even when we were inquiring about different therapies with different doctors, I would kind of put it out to the group and say, have you tried this? What have been your experiences, sort of thing? And I wanted to know, like, we were talking with our new endocrinologist about adding growth hormone to Molly's, regime, if you will, which is not fun either. It's a needle a day, and it's very invasive, and you just never know. And then with the syndrome itself, like, is it really going to benefit? And so I put it out there to all the families out there, and most of them were never even offered the option of this. So it was kind of interesting just how medical system is done in Canada compared to
It's
around
interesting.
the world. Like
Yeah.
what we're offered and what we're able to access was fascinating. And then they made some really good points. As she gets older, do you want her to be taller, heavier, especially if you have to carry her? Like, all these realistic information pieces kind of came out from their conversations, because we're on the beginning end of this, where the eldest one, Alistair's 31, in England, and it's sort of like, okay, and he's 5 foot tall. That's amazing. The fact that this syndrome was only discovered the same year and month that Molly was born is kind of miraculous as well. So it's only been around 3.5 years. So like, poor families had to
I can't
figure this
imagine
out for years.
the families that have the child that is, what is the oldest one?
Well, he's 31.
31.
Yeah.
So for 27 years, they had no idea
what
was going on.
Yeah.
We suffered for 3 years.
Yeah.
Or less than 3 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was just less than 3
Yeah.
years, and we didn't know what it was. And and that was just 2 years. I couldn't imagine what 27 plus years would
But it
be
was
like.
actually our geneticist counselor that we have, Melanie. She actually found a blog that one of the moms whose son has this syndrome started, and then she actually found all these families around the world who wrote into her, and then she actually started this Facebook group. And so now we're actually outside of the group. We've all become Facebook friends, and like, we're supportive on each other on like life stuff, not just with our kids.
In a very real sense, you guys are real pioneers in a
I
way.
know, so they told us. I know
like
that
20,
we're become
30,
like the
40 years
experts
ago,
when-
when people are saying, boy, we can really look back and remember Paul and Michelle.
I know.
And that this is a whole brand new place to start in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a little
like
scary.
That. It's amazing like that. So we talk a lot in the Vicar's Crossing about faith, obviously, and we like to kind of look at how it intersects with our life in the public square, our lives in our workplaces, or where we meet, or these types of things. So can you share at all, guys, about maybe a bit about your role of faith in your family, or where you come from around that, and how that has your faith played a role, certainly over the last couple of years with everything you've been through with Molly?
Yeah. I'll start. So, like, personally, like, I grew up in the Lutheran church, and my went to Sunday school. Like, we were very involved. And then as you get like older into your teen years, it just wasn't feeling quite right. I was questioning a lot of things, and I sort of backed away. And then having Molly, though, definitely brought a lot of questions out, and it was just, there's got to be more to this, and I don't want to be by myself trying to figure it out all the time. And it brought me back to the church and to faith, and talking about that world, because I'm like, there just has to be more to this. Like, it's too hard to do it by yourself, and there has to be more in the world. Like, there has to be a reason, in a way that we were given this gift of a child. Like, there has to be a purpose, like more than us, I guess. I know that's terribly worded, but
Not terribly worded at all.
no, in that sense.
Not at all.
And it's, even though like she's so unique and there's nobody else like her, really, being 20 in the world, kind of thing, that it's nobody will ever look like her and be like her. But at the same time, at the end of the day, she's a member of our family and a member of our community, and people always rally behind her, and everybody's been so supportive at the church. And
She's a member of your church.
absolutely, yeah. And I love how everybody calls her Molly Rose. Like, it's her first and middle name. Like, I just beyond love it, and everybody just takes her in, and just, it's so wonderful.
Yeah, a lot of people are supportive, and
But there's lots of, I don't know, I feel like in the world of faith with Molly, it's definitely become a thing that's been a supportive element.
Yeah.
How about for you, Chris?
Yeah.
Ditto.
Yeah, I was just gonna say ditto. That's what the saying.
What she
yeah.
said.
Yeah, what she said. Yeah. I never really thought of it. Really. Never really thought about it. Really,
You
to be
kinda
honest
go
with
with
you,
the flow.
kind of go. Yeah, I'm a very go with the flow person. I am, but I really don't know how to answer the question. Really, I'm not sure.
No,
sorry.
fair enough. I mean, I was thinking about like the baptism that we had
Yeah.
for Molly,
Which was beautiful.
which was
Thank
a wonderful day,
Yeah.
but the effect it had on the people in the community,
Yeah.
you know, and all baptisms are unique, and all baptisms are special, and I
Yeah.
would never want to say one's better than the other or anything
Yeah,
like
right.
that.
Yeah.
But there was something special about that day, in that like you said, Molly is so unique in so many different ways, and people connected to that.
Absolutely.
And connected to that story.
Yeah.
And I know we're talking to you afterwards and before about her story and that sort of thing. So to see that happening within the context of the faith community that day was very moving.
Yeah.
And it was moving for people, and they talked about it a lot afterwards.
Oh, that's so
that's
sweet.
good.
Welcome her into
Yeah.
our family
It's been
of faith.
amazing.
Yeah, so it was really good.
Like for you too, Rob? Like, I mean, I just think about it from the perspective of the priest. Like, you're right that sometimes, I mean, we do baptisms, and it's not to diminish anybody's baptism. Send your letters along to Reverend Rob. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes when we engage in these sacramental acts, there are times when we feel lifted somehow to a different place. And then it sounds as though for all of you involved in Molly Rose's baptism, that it was a special day, and I'm sure for you too, right? Like
very much so. Very much so it was. And you know, when you'd go through the baptismal covenant too, and when you're holding that up, and you know, we talk about it before, and then we do it in church, and we get to those very important words and covenants where we talk about you know, respecting the dignity of every human being and offering ourselves in different ways to the world, and to go through that and then have her, you know, in my arms for those few minutes, saying, "You're the epitome of what that is, what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
It's the word becomes flesh kind of thing.
That's right.
And it's happening, and
there's something really powerful about, like, what I find is when there's that little part in the service in the baptismal liturgy where you say, I sign you with the sign of the cross, and I mark you as Christ's own forever, right?
Yeah.
And I think about some of what we've been through with you know, our little Andrea and Becky, who we had to journey with for a little bit before we had to say goodbye to them and all that. So we didn't know how long forever would be with them, right? Wasn't as long as we would like.
Yeah.
But that being said, we know that the impact that they had as they journeyed was incredible, right? And I'm hearing this as you talk about Molly Rose, that her impact already, when you talk about how everyone at the church likes to refer to her as Molly Rose, and she's Christ's own.
Yeah.
And that little moment of putting that cross on her and saying, you know what, whatever you face, your dignity is above all else important.
Absolutely.
Your life matters.
Yeah.
You are God's beloved.
Yeah.
You are truly one of God's own.
Yeah.
And just because you may be a little bit different than somebody else doesn't diminish your size, your importance, your effect on the world in one little bit in God's eyes.
And when I say, you know, it affected the people in the congregation, that's exactly what that time was. You were watching that uniqueness and that beloved child of God having an effect on the 100 or so people that were sitting in that room that day, and it was right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
You know, and it was incredible,
Amazing,
incredible moment. So so good
Thank
for
you
you.
for that one, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
I'm
welcome.
getting all emotional
Yes,
here,
we like to
but-
bring.
We like to do our best
cry.
here. If I can't make them cry, I haven't done my job.
That's right.
So I just think too, as we continue it on, like you know, as Rob was saying, you're really pioneering because you're doing something that many. I mean, you're talking about a group of 20 people, 22, 23 people, 23 families. Right now, even as rare as it could be, there could be somebody out there, you know, like one of your kids ended up listening to this today.
I know.
And so, but there could be somebody out there listening to this who's hearing about this for the first time. I'm just trying to remember it again. You Hoover Fong Syndrome.
Yeah.
They could be getting that news today.
Yeah.
There could be somebody listening to this, or they Google it, and it's in the
Happy
description.
day.
It's in the
Yeah.
it's in the description of our podcast when it goes up in a couple days, and they go, "Oh, there's somebody here talking about this."
Yeah.
So it's important, I think, that they may be expecting a child or have already welcomed a child into their lives with this condition, or even something similar. I guess when you think about it, like I said, for our own experience, I just wonder, what would you say to them who are worried about what lies ahead or unsure about where to go for support? And if somebody has landed on this today because their life has been impacted by a rare genetic disorder, and they've become you know, aware of a very difficult journey they're going to have ahead of them, what are your words of hope?
Yeah, I would just say connection. Like when we got the diagnosis, I dug deep and hard into the land of Google, and I found the medical journals that there's two out there that talk about this condition, and then the chromosomal issue of TLO2. That's the name that goes with it as well. Read those, didn't understand them, Googled every medical term I could possibly learn. You find these families and finding out their story and how they are. And I remember a week after Molly got her diagnosis, a little girl in Australia came onto the family site, and it was like, she's a year older than Molly, but it was like, oh my gosh, this is Molly. Like, it is her. Like, and finding that there's another person who loves music like she does, and the same things that are humorous as she does. And it gave a real personality to the syndrome rather than just the checklist boxes of, oh, there might be a heart issue. And yeah, we have a heart issue. And yeah, there might be this. Yeah, we have the auditory issue. And yeah, we have vision issues. And yeah, you know what? I can rattle them off until I'm blue in the face. And it breaks your heart when you talk about your kid having this. The fact that I have 2 medical books full of information at home is sad.
Yeah, you really shouldn't have 2 medical
but
books.
the other side of it is the diagnosis book, which is way more hopeful. And regardless of it being like You Hoover Fong, YHFS we call it, but regardless of it being that, it's a rare disease at the end of the day, and that community is large.
That is very large.
And it's feisty, and I'm excited. She was diagnosed in March, so we haven't gone through a rare disorder awareness week yet, but I'm really excited for February, the gloomiest month in the year. I'm excited for it, just to see how other people celebrate this rarity and the uniqueness of all our little snowflakes kind of thing. But really, back to your question. Sorry, Kevin. I wandered. Like support.
You're among good company here.
We found that really the best thing is talking nonstop. If you have a concern, say it. If you're excited about something, say it, because it often makes the doctor or the specialist or the therapist you're talking to, or even another parent, go, oh, wait a second.
Right.
So even just saying, oh my goodness, we've done it so many times and it's come apart. Like, it's about, I can't even rattle one off right now. I'm drawing a blank, but we've done it so many times where we just mention something and it spirals into something amazing. Yeah. Like even
a couple
just saying,
of words
I don't
can
know,
unlock something that you want to wear.
like even saying, I don't know how to play with her. Open this whole world of the HVPI program at CPRIN. And now we're with Thames Valley Children's Center, and to say they're wonderful is such an understatement. The amount that Molly has grown just from being with them since August is mind-boggling. Like, we're learning like baby sign language on a real level that actually works for her. And she's able to communicate a little bit more with us, and she's feeding better and on her own, and our life has done a 180 since being with this therapy group, and then talking to other parents. I talked to them at the hospital. There's a resource center there, and Molly got a G-tube in January, so that's a whole other arena that we've been a part of, and that community is large too.
That will be a large community.
Tons of resources with them, but that was our biggest hurdle, I think, is because that's been the medical side of this life, which we're not accustomed to.
So when these constant conversations you're talking about having people have, and you can actually see some of the strides that have been taken. And again, I can't help but go back to that idea of pioneering. These are things you're discovering as you go that are actually going to be able to support and pay dividends to those down the road, right? So as you learn, that's going to be a huge help for those in the future. So
like
there is great hope here.
Like diet has such an effect on mobility too and stuff like that. Like, oh my gosh, we play around with our food. Amazing.
Yeah,
great.
That's
like,
interesting. And so, am I gathering from your conversation that Molly is deaf? Then she doesn't hear? Or?
She's moderate hearing loss in one ear, so she does hear us. It's spotty or it's muffled, and she's a mild loss in the other ear. And they're not sure exactly what that stems from, but it is associated with You Hoover Fong. Also, she was born prematurely, so that could be in there as well.
Right.
But yeah, so she has a hearing aid for the one ear, but she can hear us. It's just a little bit either quieter or she's missed sections. So
right. And do you have to receive care at home as well, or?
I wish.
You don't.
No.
We're trying. Thank you, Ford. No,
well, that was going to be my next question.
It's
is
awful.
Like, are there supports available through the healthcare system for you at home And if they're not,
theory.
what do we need to do to start lobbying Chairman Ford? I mean, Premier Ford, and start getting these things in place. I mean, I know again, I keep going back to Andrea and Becky, but I don't know what they would have done if they didn't have. There was in place in Newfoundland home care for people to come in and help at home.
Yeah.
And in their case, they had 2 little girls that were in a state, but they could have never done it without the help of somebody coming to help.
For sure. No, like respite is offered, but it's through special services at home through the VON.
And then you have to
And
pay?
we've been approved for it for 2 years.
Yeah.
And we still have not gotten any funding.
Well, there's no funding.
Because there is no funding.
There's no money.
So we're in it.
Yeah.
We're just not part of it.
You just can't,
sort of thing. So
access it,
and that would, the amount that comes from that is not just for respite for like Chris and I, for somebody to come in and work with her at home, but it's more for programming. Like we could send her to like special music classes or special swimming classes, because these are harder to find within our community than I would like to see. Like we've done
And they're
swimming.
expensive.
It's very expensive, but like swimming, we have to go to a warm pool because Molly is so small and has very little body fat that she freezes and turns blue, and we don't want that. So she loves water. So either we go to a hotel where we pay money to do that, or luckily Thames Valley Children's Center right now has done one, but like Chris has to take time off work to do that. So today was her swim. But even like music classes, she loves music.
Music.
What kind of music is she loving?
Oh my gosh, you name it, she loves it. But she
Just
loves like
loves
your rock
instruments.
music.
Yeah,
Like she
she
bangs in her head and
There you
dances
go.
to that. And,
She could get the music more
oh,
so.
for sure, she would love
Either
it.
win.
But she loves to make music, hear
She
music,
does.
dances to
Yeah.
music. Oh my gosh,
What
she's
about
a music
equipment needs
kid.
and things like that? Is there equipment that you need, specialty equipment at all? That
Oh, like
is
for
it-
Molly herself?
For Molly,
yeah.
Yeah.
We have a walker.
There's a walker right now, yeah.
We have it on loan right now from CPRI, but we're in talks about purchasing the next size up. So we don't know anything about this, but there is funding available with the government, and it's pretty decent. For walkers, they cover 75%, and then our
health
private
insurance
will
would
cover
go
the
through, yeah.
rest. But and same with the hearing aid, that ended up being covered very little through the government. Actually, most of that was our benefits. But they do cover some, and same with her like G-tube feeding supplies. We get a little check every 3 months, sort of thing. So there's very little, and disability tax credit and that kind of stuff. But then when
Little
you
tidbits here and there, but I
a
mean,
lot of it's qualified based on your family income. So if you're a little bit higher than that, it's
don't
basically middle
qualify,
class all the
that's-
time, right? Like you're
Right.
struggling all the time.
Right.
So either
Give it one hand and take it back with the other.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's like, even her amazing daycare that she's in, we still pay out the nose for an infant room because they
Right.
have better ratios and it's safer and all this stuff, but we're
Right.
paying more than we would for her being in a preschool room where she should be,
Right.
sort of thing, right?
Based on her age
Based
and
on
all.
age.
Yeah.
Yeah. But luckily they're amazing and don't mind keeping her
yeah.
back. So we're not
Absolutely.
really complaining about it, but it's
Right.
still money at the end of the day, right? Like,
Right. There is a cost implication.
absolutely.
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 So I just think in terms of the dignity part, right? When we talk about the
Yeah.
faith aspect of it and the business of respecting the dignity of every human being, and I think about Molly's dignity and what's going to be required for her to be respected and dignified and seen as one of God's beloved as she grows. And I think my prayer is that I know that you're in good hands in terms of you have a very strong Christian community, obviously at
Yeah.
or Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Memorial, and that it sounds as though you've got a good group of friends and so on around you. But
Yep.
but we all know that sometimes as far as the wider public goes and everything else, sometimes things can be pretty cruel.
Yeah.
And my prayer is that is that support of faith community, of family, of friends that are able to make sure that you receive the dignity you deserve as parents, and that they receive that dignity as well, and that Molly receives that dignity as well.
Yeah.
So because dignity is such a big part in all of this. So
Yeah, and we hope in some small way we've been able to kind of hold that up and get the word out on our podcast
Yeah,
and
that's
Facebook.
great.
Because,
Yeah.
like I said at the beginning, this is something that is so rare. We've been talking about that when you first told me about it.
Yeah.
I really wanted to have an opportunity to kind of get the word out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're very
No, that's
pleased that you
great.
agreed to do this.
Yeah, no, we're really honored that you asked. us to
Yeah,
be a part
very.
of
Good,
this.
and I was so glad to hear you too saying that thing in February is a real celebration.
Yeah, I'm really
And so
excited
good for
about
you
it.
for-
I know we got diagnosed 2
Yeah.
weeks after it. I was like,
Yeah,
dang.
yeah, that's right.
I love
right.
a good celebration.
No, that's good. We hope you do celebrate that and with the
Yeah.
other families as well, because that's so
Yeah, our
important.
families have been amazing, like instrumental.
Sure
Like
have.
we couldn't do it without
No, absolutely not.
anybody. Like, oh my gosh, yeah. Like,
You want to shout out to anybody? You want to say hi, Paul and Joanne?
yeah, they're watching Molly right now.
Are they watching? Paul?
Yeah, Mom and
Paul and
Dad.
Joanne.
Thank you. Feed her supper.
Feed her supper. We're on our way
Dinner
home.
supper. We're coming home, baby.
Good. We want to thank you guys for coming in, spending the
Thank
time,
you.
sharing your story,
Yeah.
and we'll look
Thanks for
forward to
having
chatting
us.
again and keeping an eye on everything. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, yeah, keeping up to
C'est
date.
bon.
okay?
Merci beaucoup.
Oh oui, merci beaucoup.
C'est bon.
Prochaine fois.
Vickers Podcast.
Ooh la la.
Vickers Crossing Podcast is available on many different forums, so we invite everybody to kind of tune in where you can find us, YouTube and SoundCloud and iTunes and Buzzsprout. I love that name.
Yeah. Bean sprouts.
Buzzsprouts, yeah.
Brussels sprouts.
Buzzsprouts, Kevin.
Yeah, and Brussels
for you.
sprouts.
And Brussels
Which one are the
sprouts.
little cabbages?
Those are Brussels sprouts.
Brussels
Yeah.
sprouts.
God awful
Yucky.
stuff.
Favorite
Oh,
story.
come
Favorite
on.
story is Ralph Young. His wife Sharon sent him, my buddy, Salvation Army Major. We're down in Windsor. She sends him to the grocery store and she says, "Bring me back a cabbage, but I don't want a big one. Bring me the smallest one you can find." And so he came home and he put a Brussels sprout on the counter.
Oh my gosh.
That's an incredible thing that he did. I just love it.
Those are Ian's favorite, right?
I actually really like Brussels.
I like
See,
the
there we
Brussels.
go. There's
I love
always one
Brussels
in the
sprouts.
crowd.
I love Brussels sprouts too. There's two in this crowd.
You hear that, Donna? Ian's coming home. He wants
Yeah,
Brussels sprouts.
Donna, get the Brussels sprouts on. He's coming home.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody for dropping by. And again, we want to thank our sponsors, Aleppo Restaurant on Wonderland Road North in London, and A. Miller George Funeral Home, where every life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family owned and operated.
And if you don't want to see Dave at A. Miller George too soon, eat your Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts. You're in good hands, Ian.
Feed a life.
All right. Well, for Paul and Michelle, and for producer Ian.
Chris and Michelle.
Chris and Michelle, sorry, did I say Paul? I did Paul in my head.
Sorry.
Chris and Michelle, Ian and Kevy, and my name is Rob. And Kevin, remember to always look both ways.
Before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Catherine Olenek. If you want to see how this podcast was edited, follow the link in the description. If you have any other questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vickers Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vickers Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!